presiding officer of the Suffolk County Legislature. During my tenure, I promoted government transparency and open access to government. This show is brought to you with the intention of informing the public through community engagement. You will hear from various local officials, community advocates, and leaders. Please enjoy the show.
Well, thank you so much, Brother Dwayne Gregory. Yes, this is Andy C. Luter, and I am your host for Dwayne Gregory Presents. I want to take a quick moment and thank Brother Dwayne Gregory for creating this platform of government access so that we could have these ongoing community conversations. I am joined by Tanya Luter Gordon and Rosalind Luter Aaron, and collectively we represent Luter Life Coaches. We are actually a collaboration with County Legislator Dwayne Gregory, and we're bringing these programs to you because we know that there are shakers and movers in our community that you need to know. And so my sisters and I are co-hosting this Dwayne Gregory Presents, and today we are elated to have a very special guest in the person of Alicia Marks. Now, I'm going to introduce or have her introduce a little more formally in just a moment, but I want to take just a quick moment to thank her for being here and welcoming her to our program. Welcome, Alicia.
Thank you so much, Bishop.
Well, friends, I feel a little odd. As you can see, I am surrounded not only by beauty, but by two of the three are AKAs, and three of the three are all graduates of Spelman College. Now, I'll make a very little confession. I desperately wanted to go to the school across the street, Morehouse. Now, while my father was more than willing to send my sisters to Spelman, he wouldn't allow me to be a Morehouse man. And I have grown up with this self-esteem issue because I could not go to the campus of Morehouse and Spelman. So I am delighted to be surrounded by all of this African-American educational royalty that I am sitting between today. So I want to start with my sister Tanya Luter Gordon and have her formally introduce our guest and give our guests an opportunity to share so much of who she is.
Welcome, audience. We are so excited about having Alicia Marks here, who is the founder and the proprietor of Marks of Excellence, which is a phenomenal educational institution in the Amityville community. But you know, we always come before you to tell you that when we talk to you, we are looking to always have an opportunity to give you a chance to be able to learn about local personalities that are really doing it. And I mean doing it in a great way, as Alicia is. Now, Alicia is very special to me because I have known Alicia since we were teenagers. And we were brought together by friends, and then, of course, we had an opportunity to go to Spelman together. So I am looking so forward to having this opportunity to engage with Alicia so she can really talk a lot about herself. I want to begin really where you were born, growing up. I want to talk about the early part of your life, how your family, friends, your centers of influence had a major impact on who you are today. And of course, you know we cannot talk about the early part of your life and not talk about Spelman. And I know we're going to have a good time doing that. So I'm going to ask you the first question. Talk to us about just your early years, where you were born, where you grew up, and how all of that had an impact on your life.
Well, first I'd like to say thank you, Bishop Luter and the Luter Life Coaches, for having me today. I really truly appreciate it. I feel very privileged to be here. I started out as a Long Islander. I am a native North Babylon person from Suffolk County, and I've never lived anywhere else. I grew up there, born and raised, my entire preteens, elementary school, all the way up through high school. As a matter of fact, I graduated the same year as Rich Schaefer, our town supervisor. He is a classmate of mine. So we've pride ourselves in being able to say that we're the class of 81, no other class like ours, and we've stayed close throughout the years.
That's wonderful. So, Alicia, talk to me about, because I know your parents had a major impact on your life as well as other centers of influence. I know these past few days we have had a chance to memorialize Myrna and Taylor, and I know you talked about how she had a major part in your life, as well as other women, whether they were in the sorority or other social and civic organizations, and directly facilitating you, bringing together, it was tutor time, but I love the name Marks of Excellence.
Thank you.
That is
Thank
a
you.
great
Thank
name.
you. Thank you so much. And I was a little disappointed when I came up with that name of Marks of Excellence, because it was the first thing I thought of. And I thought it was going to be this long, arduous trial and error. And I kept going back to Marks of Excellence. So I said, I guess that's what I'm going to have to stick with. But, growing up, again, you were mentioning people in my family, people who I've been surrounded by, plenty of giants, plenty of majestic women. First, I always talk about my father, Charles McElwain, who was a pillar of the Roosevelt community, an educator for over 35 years. And, I always give honor to those who graduated who are celebrities, as in Dr. J, who he taught, Eddie Murphy, who he taught, and Howard Stern, who he taught. But the real heroes are the people who are still in the trenches, who still are trying to raise our babies from that community. And, as they've said, don't worry about bringing up someone who has passed. Keep speaking about them, because they know that person is still living on. So to this day, I still have many people from the Roosevelt community reaching out to me and telling me the heroic stories that my father did to make them who they were today. And then there's my mother, who was a psychiatric social worker. And, we talk about kids today, how they're not kind of born and raised the way we were back in the day. And when you give a child responsibilities, it shows them how successful, the many steps that they take that helps them to add on their accomplishments. My mother got her master's degree when I was in the 7th grade. It wasn't a negative thing for me to be a latchkey kid. I was proud to be the oldest of 3 girls, to take care of my siblings, and my mother had the crock pot going all day long so that I could prepare for my sisters and be responsible. So I take pride in that. No, she wasn't the mother who stayed home and had, the pudding and the cakes waiting for you at the door, but I learned from her that success is pretty much based on your accomplishments and love at the same time, and that nurturing is the best recipe. I knew that my foundation was based on love and concern. Not just being there in the physical sense, but being there in the moral sense. So as far as that being my beginnings, as far as AKA, my cousin was a national officer. She was the international regional director for Alpha Kappa Alpha. And Myrna, there's no other like Myrna. Myrna, as I mentioned at her wake, was always telling me to keep my finger on the pulse of my business. And whenever I needed anything, or if I had a question, the question seemed so insignificant once I spoke it out of my mouth, because she always had an easy answer. She said, you just do this, or you just do that, and that's the end. I said, I could have thought of that myself, I guess. But she was the best teacher. She was a humble woman who was a very big giant in this community. And as fate would have it, after working for her in her Department of Human Services, then opening a business in her community was not something that I ever could have imagined. And I loved being able to see her right around the corner.
If you would just allow me to kind of insert very, very quickly. I know that we're going to talk about community issues a little later on in our conversation, maybe even in part 2 of our conversation. Okay. But again, Myrna Taylor recently was lost by our community, and she was a mentor. And I listened during the wake services how people like yourself and so many others talked about how she would check you, and she maintained some levels of accountability. Can
Yes.
you talk about that just a little bit? I know you all are anxious to talk about Spelman, but before we go to Spelman, let's remain here in Amityville for just a moment and talk about the influence of a motherly mentor
Yes.
like a Myrna Taylor.
Myrna Taylor was someone I looked up to as a pillar of this community. And I felt fortunate enough to be a part of the town of Babylon, and I worked with her in the Department of Human Services every day. And I learned how a person conducts business and lives life to the fullest every day. And she was, I called her the queen of entertainment, but she did it in such a regal way. She could handle a meeting, serve food, and you knew that she was serious at the same time. She made you accountable in a loving way. And I was going to go into this at the wake, but I didn't have much time. But I went to Albany to a grant writing seminar. As soon as I came back, she wanted me to write a grant. By myself. She had gone away. She came back. I always considered myself a perfectionist. And I thought that I could handle this on my own and make Myrna proud. Lo and behold, Myrna came back and nothing was done. So Myrna very regally said, "What do you mean? Nothing was done." And I said, "Myrna, and I started just like that. I tried, I did my best. I just didn't know how to formulate this so soon. I think it was too soon." She was quite angry and disappointed. However, she still loved me. The next day, everything was fine. And so you're still accountable for your actions, but I took it as a learning opportunity, and we both discussed it. We took the steps to decide how we were going to go about putting the grant together, and then eventually it was taken care of. But in my fearfulness of disappointing her, she taught me that it's okay. It's okay to say, "I didn't know, I'm sorry, and let's look at how we can make this work and be successful in the long run." So that was a huge learning curve for me, because in my growing up, as you had told me about Spelman, I stayed focused. I never wanted to make a mistake. My father always instilled in me that I'm a role model. You have to be an example for the younger two daughters. And that was pretty traumatic for me to disappoint Myrna. But I got through it. I'm still here. And she was okay. She was okay with everything that I accomplished then after.
Well, we spend a great deal of time sharing with the audience tools to help them be successful in the area of leadership. And there's so many aspects of what people need to incorporate in how they work with, whether it's with their family, whether it's with their coworkers, whether they're in management, leading people. And certainly what you just shared with us about Myrna is a very important characteristic, because when an employee, for whatever reason, might disappoint, they might not meet the mark, but you still have to have a way of embracing them and giving them the foundation that they need so they can move on for success. And at the end of the day, what you just shared with us about Myrna surely indicates that she had the tools to effectively lead. So, Alicia.
Yes.
At Spelman, I was a sophomore, and Alicia came in as a freshman. And I remember Alicia was so together. Most of us were still trying to figure it out, as far as, by sophomore year, you have to declare your major, but, a sense of purpose as much as you can have at the time. But I admired so much how Alicia was so driven, and she was so focused with her young self. And, she knew how to take advantage of the resources that the school had. I mean, she was able to travel internationally, and she was an excellent student. She was so focused. And I would always tease her about that. I'm like, how are you like that? You were just so together at such an early age. And so let's talk about that before we get to the other aspects of Spelman, because you were driven.
I was driven mainly because of Charles McElwain and Jolyn McElwain. Having been a community person, my father had many children of Roosevelt, the parents he considered. I used to think he was talking about me, he was talking about Roosevelt, his kids. And so that community aspect of always being a role model, keep your nose clean, as he would say to me, and being able to be a role model. That's all I can say. I always knew that I was representing him and my family. I would walk and throughout the historical campus of Spelman and say, I want to make my ancestors proud. I want to be able to stay focused and become something that was not just a statistic, but something with meaning and something that I could look back and say, this is what I did at Spelman. And you telling me that those days, Tanya, I really didn't realize that that was my persona. However, I did have the president of Spelman College and the head of the Department of History come to approach me, and I would have dinner in the president's house with Maynard Jackson, Andrew Young, Shirley Chisholm, and it felt special. I did feel special, but I really felt that that was an accident at that time. It was just a coincidence that they happened to pick me. I felt there's something to be said about someone complimenting you, recognizing you, being able to select you for certain instances. And those building blocks promote positivity and as you had said, Bishop, accountability. So you feel that you want to continuously do more and more for the community. When I was in high school, I did collect pins for the children of Atlanta at high school. I did a fundraiser when I was in high school. And now my sisters still talk about that. Who were you? Why did you feel that all the way in Georgia? I had never been to Georgia at the time, never been to Atlanta, but I felt this fiery urge to help. There's got to be something that I can do. And so things connect. I didn't know that I was going to end up going to Spelman College, that I was going to be amongst that history, and I just felt like I was part of it.
Well, listen, we want to get back to your days at Spelman. And again, I feel a little bit excluded because there's so much of this Atlanta atmosphere and Spelman going on. I would insert, however, that one of the presidents of Spelman was Janetta B. Cole. Correct. And Janetta B. Cole was a graduate of Oberlin College, my alma mater. So I do have some connection here, all right? Beautiful. So, and before we go back to Spelman, one of the things that you and Rosalind have in common is education, and so I want to yield and invite Rosalind to ask a question or two in the specific field of education.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate that, and I am just so delighted that you are here.
Thank you.
We welcome you and want to congratulate you.
Thank you.
On what you do as it relates to our children and our youth and preparing them for their journey in life. So I would ask this question. You indicated earlier that at some point you felt that being in the presence of such giants like Andrew Young and different high-profile individuals in Atlanta, that you thought it was a mistake or that it just kind of happened. Mm-hmm. How do you feel about that now?
In retrospect, I feel that everything has a purpose. There are no mistakes. There are no coincidences. That everyone's destiny is pre-planned. And you may not know, as I say to the students in Amityville and in Copiague for Career Day, you may not know down the road what type of profession you may be going into, but that you need to be a sponge. You need to take every opportunity. At the time I was in 7th grade, I loved Spanish. And I say to them, do you think that I knew as an adult that I was going to own my own business, that the Spanish-speaking language would be so prolific in the United States? I did not know that. but I took advantage of the opportunity to learn how to speak Spanish. And I ended up studying abroad at the University of Madrid while I was at Spelman.
Awesome.
And they normally would only allow juniors to take that position, but I went as a sophomore. And today I am fluent in Spanish, and I ask the children as a business owner, how is that an advantage for me? And they all say, because you can speak to the parents, you make them feel comfortable in your child care center, and they know that their child is going to be safe. And those are the answers they give me. And I said, that's exactly correct. But I'm here to tell them that every opportunity that you don't understand, why do you need this and why am I studying that, you take advantage of those opportunities because you never know. So I took advantage of every opportunity that came my way.
That is absolutely phenomenal, and I thank you so much, because what I'm hearing is that nothing you do will be wasted.
That's right.
And just having to take Spanish, particularly with our changing population here in North Amityville, it has certainly served you well. So I am just delighted and very excited that you're here with us today.
Thank you so much.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Now, let's talk spelling, just a little bit. My journey at Spelman is quite different from you all's journey, because when I got there, I was a major in English. Why? Because my mother was a major in English, and it actually took having to do a practical of reading to a 4th grade class a story, and at the end of the story, it was just so phenomenal. The youngsters were so responsive. I said, this is kind of like being on stage. I think I can do this. And I changed my major to child development at that time. One of the things that I would say is, 100 years ago, they didn't know anything about ADHD.
Right.
I was loaded with it. I still got a little touch today, but I'm good. Because I have systems wherein I can move forward and do the things that I need to. But there is one particular story I would like to share from that time at Spelman. When I got to Spelman College, because of the ADHD, I learned that I was reading on an 8th grade level. Now, you can do a lot reading on an 8th grade level. I worked with my mother. I made reservations. My mother owned a travel agency. And I made reservations, and I worked in her agency. And I was president of student council in the 8th grade. And I spent more time out of the classroom than I did in the classroom. So when I got to Spelman College, and everyone else was taking 12 and 15 hours, I was taking 18 and 21 hours just to come up to speed. But here came that ADHD again. And for the next 3 years, every weekend, I would be on the road with a rhythm and blues group who had a #1 record. And I had a situation my junior year where in my final examination, Mrs. Christine King Farris, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s sister,
Yes.
who was the only instructor for teaching reading in the elementary school. And we had a final examination that was scheduled for the Monday morning. Well, I went in on Thursday and I gave her my final exam and indicated that I would be here in time for the final on Monday. And I wanted to confirm the time at 1 o'clock. And Ms. Christine King Farris let me know in no uncertain terms that my parents did not send me to Spelman College to be shaking it up and shaking it down, up and down the eastern seaboard. And so she accepted my final exam, and we had played Washington and Richmond. And I knew I wasn't going to be able to get back in time in that station wagon pulling that trailer. So I took the $100 that I made that weekend and bought a one-way ticket back to Atlanta. Well, as I approached the reading room, my Spelman sisters were exiting the room. I said, y'all walking in the wrong direction. They said, no, the final was changed to 11 o'clock in the morning. I said, okay. And then Mrs. King Farris told me that I was welcome to finish the exam in the remaining time, which was 15 minutes. So now I had a decision. that I had to make. Was I going to just accept that, or was I going to follow through and actually graduate? So I attended Hofstra University, and there were 3 hitches. Number 1, Spelman had to approve it. Number 2, they were only offered on the graduate level. And number 3, I had to take a minimum of 2 classes. Well, I think those were probably the only 2 A's I got while I was at Spelman. And they did approve it, and I did graduate. But I would say this. Mrs. Farris really did have my best interests at heart. I had to live some life in order to realize that. Mm-hmm. But I shared that because I need people to know. Number 1, nothing you do will be wasted. But number 2, there are decisions and choices that we have to make going forward. So, having said that, have you ever had a crossroad wherein you had to make a decision? You weren't quite sure as to what it was, but you made that decision and share with us, how did it turn out?
How many of those have I really experienced to making tough decisions? You know, being a business owner in itself is not easy. To be a child care provider on top of that is even more difficult. We have had situations in our community where we may have some families that don't have the best parenting skills. And to have to make that decision, to make that phone call, because a parent we know isn't exhibiting the best parenting skills, is a difficult one. As a child care provider, I am a mandated reporter.
Yes.
And so that being said, those children are my responsibility in the name of Marks of Excellence. And so when you make that call and the child is eventually taken away, and having had the name Tutor Time did not really represent the grassroots of what we as a North Amityville child care provider illustrates. I have always said when I was a franchisee that we are grassroots. I'm not going to pick up the phone as the other franchisees saying, it's a beautiful day at Tutor Time, how can I help you today? So that to me is too commercialized. We are taking care of lives and families, and we are not only a child care provider but a resource center for families and the community. And so that being said, when you make those tough decisions, when that phone call is made in the name of Marks of Excellence, that was difficult. And when I did make that call, and CPS did come, and they did take that child, and the teachers are wiping their eyes as they walk away, we had representation from the franchisor, who then got it and said, you really are grassroots. You really do have a different mission than the rest of our franchisees. And so that can't be spoken about. You have to witness what we do day in and day out. And I like the fact that I can lay my head down at night and say, I'm comfortable where I am. I'm comfortable knowing that these babies are in good hands. You can say that all day long, but you need some truth to it.
Listen, we're going to go on and on and on, and we're going to take a hard break, and we're going to invite Alicia Marks back. We have so much more to share with you. Again, I'm Andy C. Luter. Tanya Luter Gordon and Rosalind Luter Aaron are our co-hosts on Dwayne Gregory Presents. We are collectively Luter Life Coaches. Our guest is Alicia Marks. We're going back to Dwayne Gregory for the conclusion of this episode, but look for us again because we will be continuing this conversation in the future.
We have reached the conclusion of this show, and I hope you have found it to be very informative. Until next time, Presiding Officer Dwayne Gregory.